Picture this: a tiny figure trudging through blinding snow, her mittens frozen stiff, her breath coming in small clouds. She's only 8 years old, and she's about to stumble upon something that will change everything she thought she knew about courage, sacrifice, and what it means to be a hero. What she finds half buried in that snowdrift will shake an entire town to its core. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why grown men wept, why a community came together like never before, and why sometimes the smallest among us carry the biggest hearts. Before we begin, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This story deserves to be heard, and I promise you've never heard anything quite like it. Also, drop a comment below, telling me about a time when you or someone you know showed incredible courage. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to February 14th in the small mountain town of Pinewood Ridge. It was Valentine's Day, but there was nothing romantic about the weather that had descended upon Pinewood Ridge. The storm had rolled in 3 days earlier, fiercer than anything the forecasters had predicted. Schools were closed, roads were impassable. The town of 3,000 souls had essentially been cut off from the outside world. 8-year-old Emma Chen lived with her grandmother in a small cottage at the edge of town. Her parents were overseas, her father serving in the military, her mother a nurse working with relief organizations. Emma understood sacrifice, even at her young age. She understood what it meant to miss someone, to worry about someone, to pray for their safe return. That morning, her grandmother, Margaret, had woken with a terrible fever. At 72, Margaret was strong, but Emma could see the worry in her eyes as she struggled to get out of bed. "Sweetie," Margaret whispered, her voice hoarse, "I need my medicine, the prescription. It's at Miller's Pharmacy downtown. But the roads..." Emma looked out the window. The snow was falling so thick you couldn't see the neighbor's house just 50 yards away. The wind howled like a wounded animal. Every instinct told her to stay inside, stay warm, stay safe. But her grandmother needed that medicine, and Emma had learned from her parents that sometimes you have to be brave even when you're terrified. "I'll go, Grandma," Emma said, her voice small but determined. "I know the way." Margaret tried to protest, but another coughing fit seized her. Emma was already putting on her winter coat, her boots, her scarf. She tucked a small flashlight into her pocket, along with the prescription note, and kissed her grandmother's hot forehead. "I'll be back before you know it," Emma promised. She had no idea how wrong she would be. The cold hit Emma like a physical wall the moment she stepped outside. The snow was already up to her knees in some places, and the wind tried to push her back toward the house. But Emma was small and stubborn, two qualities that would serve her well in the hours to come. She knew the route to downtown by heart, past the Hendersons' place, through the small park with the frozen pond, along Maple Street where the old church stood, then straight down Main Street to the pharmacy. But the storm had transformed everything. Familiar landmarks were buried or distorted. The world had become an endless white void, and Emma found herself veering off course more than once. Her teeth chattered, her fingers ached even inside her mittens. But she pushed forward, thinking of her grandmother, thinking of how her mother and father faced challenges so much bigger than this. Then she heard it. A sound that made her blood run cold. A weak, pitiful whimper cutting through the wind. Emma stopped, her heart pounding. There it was again, an animal in distress. She turned toward the sound, squinting through the snow. Off to her right, near what she thought was the entrance to Miller's Woods, she could make out a dark shape half buried in a snowdrift. Every survival instinct told her to keep moving, to get to the pharmacy, to not investigate strange noises in a blizzard. But Emma had grown up with animals. She volunteered at the local shelter every weekend. She couldn't just walk past something in pain. She trudged toward the shape, and as she got closer, her heart nearly stopped. It was a dog, a German shepherd, its dark fur matted with snow and ice. But this wasn't just any dog. Even through the storm, Emma could see the official vest, the patches that marked it as a K9 unit. "Oh no," Emma whispered, dropping to her knees beside the animal. "Oh no, oh no, oh no." The dog's eyes opened slightly, looking at her with desperate, intelligent eyes. It whimpered again, and Emma saw that one of its back legs was trapped under something, twisted at an unnatural angle. And then she saw the other shape, just beyond the dog, barely visible against the white backdrop. A person, a man, face down in the snow. Emma's scream was swallowed by the wind. She scrambled toward the figure, her small hands pushing away snow, and her breath caught in her throat when she saw the uniform. The badge, the officer's hat, just inches from his outstretched hand. Mister, wake up!" Emma shook his shoulder, but there was no response. She pressed her ear to his back, the way she'd seen people do in movies, and felt the faintest rise and fall of breathing. He was alive. Barely. Emma looked at the dog, then at the officer, then out at the swirling snow that seemed to go on forever. She was 8 years old, she was alone, and she had just found 2 lives hanging by a thread in the middle of a blizzard. She could feel panic rising in her chest, like freezing water, threatening to drown her. She wanted to cry, she wanted to run home to her grandmother. She wanted her parents, but then she remembered something her father had told her before he deployed. He'd knelt down, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Emma, courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. You have that kind of courage. I can see it in you." Emma wiped the tears that had frozen on her cheeks. She took a deep breath, and then she got to work. First, the dog. Emma knew she couldn't leave it trapped like that. She could see what had happened now, traces of the accident visible beneath the snow. There was a fallen tree branch, massive and heavy, pinning the dog's leg. The officer must have been trying to free the animal when he collapsed from the cold. Emma grabbed the branch and pulled with all her strength. It didn't budge. She tried again, her boots slipping in the snow, her muscles screaming. Nothing. Think, Emma, think. She remembered physics lessons from school, learning about levers and fulcrums. She looked around desperately and spotted a smaller branch nearby. Working quickly, her fingers numb and clumsy, she wedged the smaller branch under the larger one and pushed down with all her weight. The branch shifted, just an inch, but it was enough. The dog, sensing freedom, dragged itself forward with its front paws, whimpering in pain, but determined. Emma helped pull it clear, and the moment it was free, the dog collapsed, panting heavily. "It's okay, boy," Emma whispered, running her hands over its fur. "It's okay. I've got you." But she didn't have them. Not really. They were still in the middle of a blizzard. The officer was unconscious, the dog was injured, and Emma herself was already shaking from the cold. She knew she couldn't move the officer. He was too big, too heavy. But she also knew that staying still in this cold was a death sentence. Emma made a decision. She would build them shelter. Using the same determination that had carried her this far, Emma began to work. She remembered reading about snow caves, about how the Inuit people survived in the Arctic, She used her hands, her boots, anything she could to hollow out a space in the large snowdrift nearby. It was exhausting work. Her muscles ached. Her breath came in ragged gasps. But she kept going. When she had created a small cave, she faced her next challenge: moving them. The dog went first. Emma looped her arms under its front legs and dragged it backward into the shelter. The dog whimpered but didn't fight her. It seemed to understand she was trying to help. Then the officer. Emma knew this was impossible. He had to weigh 3 times what she did. But she had to try. She grabbed his arms and pulled. He moved perhaps 6 inches. Emma pulled again, her boots finding purchase in the packed snow. Another few inches. Her back screamed in protest. Her arms felt like they were on fire. But she kept pulling. Inch by inch, minute by agonizing minute, Emma dragged the unconscious officer toward the shelter. It took her nearly 30 minutes to move him just 20 feet, and by the end, she was sobbing from exhaustion and cold. But she did it. With both the officer and the dog huddled in the small snow cave, Emma used the fallen branches to create a partial windbreak at the entrance. Then she did something that would later make medical professionals marvel. She wedged herself between the officer and the dog, using her own small body heat to create warmth for both of them. The dog, as if understanding Emma's sacrifice, curled itself as close to her as possible, pressing its warm body against hers. The officer remained unconscious, but Emma could feel his shallow breathing, could feel his chest rising and falling. "Stay with me," Emma whispered to them both. "Please stay with me. Help will come. It has to come." But as the hours ticked by and the storm showed no signs of stopping, Emma began to wonder if anyone even knew they were missing. Time became strange in that snow cave. Emma would drift in and out of consciousness, jerking awake each time to check that the officer was still breathing, that the dog's eyes were still open. She talked to them constantly, telling them stories about her parents, about her grandmother, about her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. The dog would occasionally lick her hand as if to say, "I'm here. I'm listening." At some point, Emma felt the officer stir. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "Rex," he mumbled. "Where's Rex?" "The dog?" Emma asked, pressing closer to him. "He's here. He's right here. We're all together." The officer's eyes found Emma's face, and even in his delirium, she saw confusion cross his features. "Kid," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Why? What are you?" "I found you," Emma said simply. "You and Rex. You needed help." The officer tried to speak again, but his eyes closed. Emma felt a stab of panic, but his breathing remained steady. He had just slipped back into unconsciousness. Emma lost track of how long they stayed like that. The cold was seeping into her bones now, making her feel sleepy, making her want to just close her eyes and rest. She knew that was dangerous. She'd learned about hypothermia in school, but she was so tired. The dog, Rex, seemed to sense Emma's fading consciousness. He barked, a weak sound that nonetheless jarred Emma back to alertness. Then he did something remarkable. He began to howl. It was a long, mournful sound that cut through the wind. He howled again and again, using what must have been the last of his strength to call out into the storm. And somewhere, in the white void beyond their little cave, someone heard. The search party that found them wasn't random. It was led by Margaret Chen, Emma's 72-year-old grandmother. When Emma hadn't returned after 2 hours, Margaret had done something that defied all logic and medical advice. Fever or no fever, weak or not, she had bundled herself up and gone out into the storm. But she hadn't gone alone. Margaret had called their neighbor, Tom Hendricks, a retired park ranger. Then she'd called the fire department. Then she'd called anyone she could think of who might help search for her granddaughter. Despite the storm, despite the danger, 17 people had volunteered to form search parties. They'd divided up the possible routes Emma might have taken, and they'd gone out into the blizzard. Margaret herself had insisted on coming, refusing to stay behind, even when the firefighters pleaded with her. "That's my granddaughter out there," she'd said, her voice like steel despite the fever. "I'm going." It was Margaret who heard Rex's howls. It was Margaret who recognized them as coming from the direction of Miller's woods. It was Margaret who led the rescue team directly to the snow cave, where 3 lives hung in the balance. When the flashlight beams cut through the storm and illuminated the entrance to Emma's makeshift shelter, Margaret's cry of relief and anguish could be heard over the wind. "Emma! Oh my God! Emma!" The rescue team moved with professional speed. They had thermal blankets, medical supplies, a stretcher. Within minutes, they had carefully extracted all 3 from the snow cave. Emma's first words, even as they wrapped her in blankets, were, "Is my grandma okay? She needs her medicine." Margaret, tears streaming down her face, held her granddaughter close. "I'm fine, baby. I'm fine. You're the one who needs medicine now." The paramedics checked Emma's vitals and found them remarkably stable, all things considered. Her core temperature had dropped dangerously low, but not to the critical point. The dog, Rex, was hypothermic and had a badly broken leg, but he was alive. And Officer James Hartley, as they would soon learn his name, was suffering from severe hypothermia and frostbite, but he too would survive. All 3 lives saved, against impossible odds, by an 8-year-old girl who refused to give up. The story could have ended there. It would have been remarkable enough. But what happened in the days and weeks that followed revealed something that no one, least of all Emma, had expected. When Officer James Hartley woke up in the hospital 2 days later, the first thing he asked about was the little girl who had saved him. The nurses told him that Emma Chen was recovering well at home, that her quick thinking and determination had saved 3 lives that night. But it was what James said next that would bring the full circle of the story into focus. "Chen," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma Chen. Is her father named David Chen? Sergeant David Chen?" The nurses confirmed it, confused by his reaction. James closed his eyes, and tears began to stream down his face. 7 years earlier, James Hartley had been deployed in the same unit as Sergeant David Chen. During an operation that went wrong, James had been trapped under rubble after an explosion. David Chen, against orders, against all logic, had gone back for him. David had pulled James from that rubble, carrying him on his back for 2 miles through hostile territory until they reached safety. David Chen had saved James Hartley's life, and now, 7 years later, David's daughter had done the same thing. When the hospital told this story to the local news, the reporter who came to interview James asked him what he wanted to say to Emma. James looked directly into the camera, his voice steady despite his emotion. "Emma, you have your father's courage. You have his heart. He saved my life once, and you saved it again. I don't know if I believe in fate or destiny, but I believe in the Chen family. You're heroes, every one of you." The news segment went viral. Within days, the story had spread across the country. News outlets from coast to coast were covering the incredible tale of the 8-year-old girl who saved an officer and his dog in a blizzard, and the connection to her father's own act of heroism years before. But the most touching moment came 2 weeks after the rescue, when Emma was finally allowed to visit James and Rex in their recovery. James was still in the hospital, recovering from frostbite that had nearly cost him several fingers. Rex was in a veterinary clinic, his leg in a cast, but his tail wagging the moment Emma walked in. Emma ran to the dog first, hugging him carefully, whispering how brave he'd been. Then she turned to James, suddenly shy in the presence of the man she'd saved. James held out his bandaged hand to her. "Emma," he said, his voice gentle. "Do you know what your father used to say to me?" Emma shook her head. "He used to say that courage runs in families, that it's passed down like a gift. I didn't really understand what he meant until now." James smiled, tears in his eyes. "You're just like him, Emma. The world needs more people like you, like the Chens." Emma, her own eyes welling with tears, asked the question that had been on her mind since she woke up in the hospital. "Did I do good? I was so scared. I almost ran away." James pulled her into a gentle hug. "Being scared doesn't make you any less brave. Being scared and doing it anyway? That's what real heroism looks like." The town of Pinewood Ridge held a ceremony 3 weeks later, on a clear, sunny day that seemed impossible after the storm that had nearly claimed 3 lives. Emma stood on a small stage in the town square, wearing her best dress, her grandmother beside her. The mayor was there. The entire fire department. Half the town had shown up, but the most important people were in the front row. Her mother had managed to come home from overseas. Her father, Sergeant David Chen, had been given emergency leave. They sat together, holding hands, watching their daughter with expressions of fierce pride and love. Officer James Hartley was there too, still using a cane, but insisting on standing for the ceremony. Rex sat beside him, wearing a special harness that kept his healing leg supported. The dog's tail wagged when he saw Emma, and Emma waved back at him with a huge smile. The mayor read the official commendation. "For extraordinary courage and selfless action in the face of mortal danger, we hereby recognize Emma Chen as an honorary first responder of Pinewood Ridge and award her the town's Medal of Valor." The crowd erupted in applause. People were crying, including several burly firefighters who weren't ashamed to show their tears. But the speech that really mattered came from Emma's father. David Chen stepped to the microphone, his military uniform pressed and perfect, his eyes shining with emotion as he looked at his daughter. "Emma," he said, his voice carrying across the square, "when I left for deployment, you were just a little girl. I worried about leaving you. I worried about what would happen if you needed me, and I wasn't there." He paused, composing himself. "But you've shown me something I should have known all along. You don't need me to be strong. You don't need me to be brave. You already are those things. You always have been." David knelt down in front of Emma, eye to eye with her. "I saved James's life once. But you know what? You did it better than I did. You didn't have training. You didn't have equipment. You didn't have backup. All you had was a good heart and the determination to help someone in need. That's not something they teach in the military. That's something you're born with." He took the Medal of Valor from the mayor and gently placed it around Emma's neck. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Not because you saved lives, though that's incredible, but because when you were scared, when you were alone, when every instinct told you to run, you chose kindness instead. You chose to help. That's the definition of a hero." Emma threw her arms around her father's neck, and the crowd's applause became a roar. But perhaps the most beautiful moment came after the ceremony, when the crowd had dispersed, and it was just Emma, her family, James, and Rex. James looked at David, then at Emma. then back at David. "I guess we're even now," he said with a smile. David shook his head. "No, my friend. My daughter just made sure I'll always be one up on you." He grinned, and both men laughed, the kind of laugh that comes after surviving something impossible. Emma sat on the ground with Rex, the dog's head in her lap. "You know what?" she said, looking up at all the adults. "I'm going to be a K-9 officer when I grow up, just like Rex. We'll save people together." Rex licked her face, and Emma giggled, the sound of a child who had faced death and come out the other side stronger, braver, and more certain of who she was meant to be. As the sun set over Pinewood Ridge that evening, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink, Emma Chen, 8 years old, hero, daughter of heroes, sat with her family and the 2 lives she had saved, and understood something that many people never learn in a lifetime. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about loving someone or something, or then you fear the danger. It's about taking one more step when everything in you says to stop. It's about being small in a big, scary world and deciding that you matter, that your actions matter, that you can make a difference. And sometimes the biggest heroes come in the smallest packages. So there you have it. The story of Emma Chen, Officer James Hartley, and Rex, 3 souls brought together by a storm and bound together by courage, sacrifice, and an unbreakable connection between 2 generations of heroes. Emma is 11 now. She volunteers at the K-9 training facility every weekend. Rex, fully recovered, has become something of a mascot there. And he still lights up every time Emma walks in. Officer Hartley returned to full duty and now speaks at schools about courage and never giving up. He always brings Rex with him, and he always tells Emma's story. And Emma? She's just a regular kid. She goes to school, she does her homework, she argues with her grandmother about eating her vegetables. But everyone who knows her, everyone who looks at that medal of valor hanging in her room, knows that she's something more. She's proof that heroism isn't about size or age or training. It's about heart. And Emma Chen has enough heart for 1,000 lifetimes. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me, what does courage mean to you? And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Until next time, remember, you're never too small to make a big difference.